Welcome to the Retiring Real Estate Investor Podcast, where we will discuss how to defer taxes on the sale of your property, earning passive real estate income, and everything you need to know to go from active investor to passive investor. Join us as we interview passive investment sponsors, explore the journey of other retiring real estate investors, and share our due diligence process we perform to select passive investments. Investment advisory services provided by Insight Investment Advisors LLC, a registered investment advisor. This podcast is only intended for clients and interested investors residing in the states in which we are registered to provide investment advisory services or exempt from registration. Please contact us to determine if the firm provides investment advisory services in the state where you reside. All content on this podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be considered investment advice. Material presented is believed to be reliable sources, and no representations are made by our firm as to another party's informational accuracy or completeness. Insight Investment Advisors LLC and its representatives do not provide tax or legal advice, and nothing herein should be construed as such. Always consult with your tax advisor or attorney regarding your specific circumstances. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Retiring Real Estate Investor Podcast. I am your host, Brandon Bruckman. I'm excited to be joined by the Prince. He's here, Prince Eboka. Prince, how are you?
I'm doing terrific. Thank you for having me on. It's an honor to be here.
Oh, it's so good to have you on. So we've recently met, and you're the founder, the operator of Pillar Housing, and I was so interested about your story. It was immensely intriguing to me, and we're just getting to know each other. I'm like, I don't care. I need to have you on because I want our listeners to hear about your background, what you're working on, your story. It's really intriguing. So maybe let's start there. Tell our listeners about, what you're working on now and kind of your path to how you got there.
So yeah, as mentioned, I'm the owner and founder of Pillar Housing. It's a private investment company, private equity company, whereby we acquire buildings, real estate that we lease out to home health care operators and nonprofit organizations. So these essentially are your assisted living facilities, your sober living homes, your behavioral health facilities, housing for veterans. We've even been approached by group homes that deal with children and adults with mental disabilities. So all of these organizations, they reach out to us, and then we provide them with the housing that they need.
And that's awesome. And how did you come to this, I'd say, business model? What led you down the path to come here? Because I found it very unique about the service that you're providing, and you're bringing investors to that equation. How did you get here?
No, that's a terrific question. It actually goes back to what you said earlier, like the greatest ideas start off as an accident. It actually came about in the middle of the pandemic. It was multifaceted. So on the first hand, I had a family friend who had reached out to my father, who then reached out to me. She'd been operating group homes for about 18 years, and she was growing her business. So now she was at a part in her business where she needed more housing. And my father, I guess, let it slip about what I was doing. At the time, we were actually acquiring properties that we were doing second chance housing for. So affordable housing for families that weren't able to qualify for a mortgage. We would do like a lease option rent to own model for those particular families. And so I guess in so many words, he had shared that with the family friend and connected me with her. And, one thing led to another, and she kind of shared with me the business model and how it works from her perspective. And one thing I noticed that was a very key piece of this is that most investors and most landlords, most banks, they don't want to work with group homes whatsoever. And it's mainly a discrimination thing. They hear the word group home and they run to the hills. Whereas when she broke down the entire process, her 18 years of experience, what it took, the fact that they get funded through Medicaid, it was kind of just like a no-brainer. It was like, oh, goodness, why wouldn't I want to rent to you guys? This meeting happened probably about a week before the pandemic was officially the pandemic. So like before March 14th of 2020. And instantly, once everything shut down, the moratorium happened. So a lot of my friends that own regular rentals, they were stuck in between a rock and a hard place. having renters not pay rent and having to still pay the mortgage. Whereas one thing I found was with our model, we were still getting rent payments month after month after month, sometimes even weeks early.
Do the banks just assume, and other traditional lenders here, do they just assume that let's call them tenants and businesses, do they assume those tenants and businesses just don't have any money? Is that the sticking point? What do you
So
think? Where do you think that comes from?
you know what? I think it comes through many factors, because obviously banks, they still have to go through their underwriting process. And I think also it's newer, so there may not be a criteria based just yet. So when an operator wants to go buy a home, one thing they'll have to do then is just buy it as though it's a non-owner occupied investment property.
Mm-hmm.
And so for an operator that's just starting out or only has 1 or 2 years experience, they're not in a position where they can show tax returns or they can show that level of consistency that a bank would want.
Gotcha. This creates opportunity for you and for
Oh
your investors, right?
gosh.
So talk about how do you screen for them then? So there must be, I'm trying to find where the bad stuff is. There must be some groups here that unfortunately don't have the business model or financial stability. So how are you kind of going through that diligence process on those potential tenants?
That's a terrific question. So first things first, experience. That matters a lot. We're at a point now, going back to your comment about demand, we're at a point now where every single day my phone's blowing up from a new operator that wants to work with us. And by new, I mean new to us. We've never met in the past. They're reaching out to us because they heard about us or what we've done in the community or helped out a friend of theirs. And, our business thus far has literally only grown word of mouth. We haven't advertised. We haven't gone out into the market, said, hey guys, here's what we do. It's just been, hey, I heard you helped out X, Y, and Z. And, they said that you'd be the perfect person to help us get a house for our operation. As far as where all the bad stuff is, there's multifaceted. The number one thing is, where's their intent? Are they actually in this business to help people, or are they just in this business to make money? One thing that's been going on legislative wise is now the Fed is actually cracking down on these operations, and I'm glad that it's happening. There's a lot of people taking advantage of the, I don't want to call them poor, but of these individuals who are dealing with, and I'm more so speaking on the sober living demographic right now. Mm-hmm. There are some people in this business that are taking advantage of these people who are not in the best mental health state, who are abusers and users, and they're starting to get shut down, which is the best thing that could happen in this industry right now. We only need people that who actually have the heart to do this. That's one of the things that we vet. A lot of it is just having a basic conversation like the ones that you and I are having right now. Obviously, checking their financials is a big thing too. One thing that I always say is I never look at them as tenants. I look at them as partners. So we do our absolute best to provide the best quality service and the best quality product, i.e. real estate, for them. So we're not just going to be slumlords, but we really want to make sure that at the end of the day, when we're doing our underwriting process and identifying facilities for them, that we're actually thinking about the clients and their clients. We're actually thinking about the residents. We're actually thinking about the staff that's going to be in these houses, in these facilities. That was a long-winded answer. I hope I answered the question.
Yeah, you did. And then some, with a bunch of good stuff. Talk a little, let's backtrack for a second. We didn't even mention what area of the country you're in. And then talk about how many homes, and talk about the kind of the criteria for what you're looking for out of the real estate. Does that change by the partner that you're working with?
Yeah. So I'm in Arizona, Phoenix, Arizona, Maricopa County right now. As we continue to grow, obviously want to expand throughout the region and then into other states. Regarding, what was the second question?
Oh, I was curious about the criteria for the real estate that you're looking at. And is that changed by the partner that you're working with? Because it's not one type of partner you're looking to help. I'm hearing maybe 3 or 4 different kinds. Does that change your investment criteria, what you're looking for out of that real estate?
Yes. So a couple of things. We generally, that mainly depends on the license. So the kind of licensing that the service provider, we call them, that they have will determine the kind of real estate and what we would need to do to that real estate. So if it's a nursing home or assisted living facility, what they require from a housing perspective, from a facility perspective, is way different than an operator service provider that's in behavioral health or sober living. So thus far, since the majority of our demand has been coming in from the sober living community, it's mainly what we look for is now neighborhood demographics. So we're not in the nicest of nicest neighborhoods, but we're also not in the slums. We're generally in B class, working class neighborhoods. You know, how safe is it at night? Are we nearby a liquor store? Do you see a lot of loitering? You know, people that may be in alleyways or not doing things that would generally cause a resident or a client to relapse. You know, all those small little finer details we definitely take a look at. You know, security cameras, how nice is the neighborhood? Reason why we're not in the A class neighborhoods or the too nice neighborhoods is now you're dealing with NIMBYism. And for the audience members who don't know what NIMBYism is, that's basically an acronym for not in my backyard. And, you know, so everyone wants, it's a paradox because everyone wants these programs to take place. Everyone wants their grandmother to be taken care of. Everyone wants for these second chances, but no one wants it next door. No one wants it in their neighborhood. They want it far away. So there's, you know, we try to be very cognizant of that.
That's so fascinating. Yeah, we see it. We see, as our listeners know, I'm in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. We see it here as well. In some of our more affluent neighborhoods that are all about affordable housing until you come to their city council wanting to build one, and then that gets rejected because I don't want it in my backyard. It's a real thing, and it's a paradox. It's probably some other choice adjectives that I'll skip. Like, really, if you're about it, be about it. If you're not, don't. But you can't be in between. Talk a little bit about supply and demand that you're seeing. Are you finding enough supply then in your market? What you would refer to as a buy box is pretty tight. Are you finding struggles with finding the right supply to meet the demand that you're seeing from these providers?
That is a terrific question. Here's why. From a housing perspective, no. There's what I've found is when capital is in place, you can always find a deal. You can always find a house. You can always find the right house. Where we're finding our largest challenges, I will say, is raising capital. So like I said, we're getting requests day in and day out from new service providers that are well capitalized, that are very qualified to work with us. But at the same time, now it's, you know, raising millions of dollars with investors to place that capital. That's where we've been. Investors move at their own timeline compared to a service provider. When a service provider reaches out to us, they need something yesterday. Case in point, I had a lady reach out to me on Christmas Eve, like 10 p.m. on Christmas Eve, saying that, hey, the clinic that she was working with, they just, one of their service providers just got shut down, and they have 12 clients that they're passing on to her, and she has nowhere to put them.
Oof, okay.
You know, so it's like they're reaching out to us saying, hey, you know, we need a place. How soon can you help us with the house? And it's like, sheesh, you know, calling an investors, they want to vet you out. They want to make sure they feel comfortable with you, which for really good reason. So it's a mix of, the best way I put it is every single morning I wake up, I got the beautiful opportunity to mix altruism with capitalism, you know, so it's balancing the two.
I hear you exactly. Talk a little bit about, so from an investor perspective, talk a little bit about the structure that you're pursuing, because I also thought that was a bit unique as well.
Could you elaborate a bit more?
Oh, I think we had talked, people are going to see the sausage and where it's built. We have talked before. We talked a little bit about the joint venture structure that you'll pursue with investors. Discuss that for our listeners.
Yeah, so we generally operate on a JV basis, and the main reason is because one thing I found with the investors that we work with, and a lot of investors that I've spoke to, is they love the exclusivity of it. Yes, we could have done a fund. Yes, we could structure a syndication. However, these investors, a lot of the times, they don't want to be pulled together with a bunch of other investors, especially ones that they don't know. They like having the exclusivity of being able to call me up or call up my team or call up our accountant and know exactly what's going on with their particular investment. Then there's the ownership structure. So there's really yeah, so that as far as how we structure things, that's our primary model.
Yeah, it's interesting that you're being very flexible with meeting investors' needs as they come to you, and you're open to that, which I think many others probably aren't. You alluded to the team. Talk a little bit about the team and sort of you're building an organization around this. Talk a little
Yeah.
bit about the team and how you're thinking about building that.
Actually, to even touch on a quick comment, because I don't want to
Sure,
forget that,
please.
that you had just mentioned. So the other thing about the JV model that we do also is we really, again, we tailor each investment to the investor's needs. That's actually another primary reason why we do the joint venture model. Instead of saying it's our way or the highway, we actually, go through the process of figuring out exactly what is your needs. You know, most of our investors are either medical professionals, retirees, or entrepreneurs, just like us. So each, as you can imagine, just those three demographics alone have completely different needs. So now we're uncovering what those are, and we're really diving in deep to make sure that what we're doing resonates perfectly with this particular investor. As far as our team goes, yeah, so we have a team. I'll start off with the attorneys because they're almost one of the most important. I work with at least four attorneys. It's more attorneys than I'd like to admit.
Now I remember, so I came from, as our listeners know, I come from the hedge fund world where I could close my eyes, reach my hand out, and there would be an attorney wherever I would place my hand. So
Yo,
I hear exactly what you're saying. They're everywhere to be found. We love all of you. Thank you for
yes,
what you do and that you're there. But it has to be a very challenging aspect of what you're working on because these providers are under specific sort of guidelines from their perspective. And I would imagine that your lawyers are watching those as well.
I do. You know what? I actually come from a different perspective. I love it. I love it. I love the regulation of what we do, and I love working with the attorneys because they actually, here are the boundaries, here are the barriers. How can we fit within these barriers? And when it comes to the service providers, the regulation actually helps out because it makes it more of a safe and concrete operation versus if there's no rules, people do anything. And we want to be able to we want to really avoid that, especially when we're handling investor capital, especially when we're investing our own capital. We want to make sure that everything we're doing is as safe and secure as possible over the long term.
Mm-hmm. It matters. I think about an industry that we spend a lot of time in with 1031 exchanges and qualified intermediaries. That is a completely unregulated industry. And if you want to have some fun, go look up on Bigger Pockets qualified intermediary horror stories because there's some classic American greed. Prince is writing this down. There's some classic American greed horror stories out there. And the biggest players in this space, in the qualified intermediary space, are begging for regulation. They want regulation. They want it inside of their space. So there is a place here for proper regulation of the playing field. So we all know that we're playing the same game and people remain safe. So I'm glad you mentioned that.
Yeah, I mean, I know it's the wild, wild west out here, but still, when you're dealing with other people's lives, regulation is not bad. The way I see it, regulation is not bad.
Yeah, and you got a couple different levels that you're dealing with here, and the first and primary is caring for the clients, probably of your partners, is
Yep.
probably primary concern number one. But then you have the downstream concern too of your company, and then of your investors as well. So I see why there's four of our attorney friends that are
Yeah.
on board. That makes sense.
The
What
way
about
the
the
way
rest
we
of it?
look at it. Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was saying to that point, the way that we look at it is when we're working an investment, we first start off with the client, the staff, the operators themselves. our investors, and then ourselves.
Mm.
Because if the clients are taken care of, one thing I've learned is if the clients are taken care of, everything else will follow.
Perfect. See, I'm glad you talked to, not me. What about the rest of the team? So see the lawyer. See, here's one of the things the lawyers did is they sucked up all the time that we were going to talk about the rest of the team. We almost forgot. So tell me about the rest of the team that you're working with.
Shout out to my team. So we have Oscar, who's on our acquisition team. He's a licensed agent. He also is an investor himself, which is a very big key. I know many agents, they're just agents. But when you actually have an investor as an agent, they also understand what you're looking for and where some of the motives may be. We actually have two of our investors also on our advisory board. Dave, shout out to Dave and TJ. They're very pivotal. Dave was actually my very first investor in as far as this model goes, and he's been very open-minded and very trusting of us. And of what we do. And that actually was, believe it or not, a very big push in the right direction for myself. I'll even speak for. Mm-hmm. Shout out to Miss Rebecca Wright. She's our accountant. So she handles all the bookkeeping, all of the accounting, taxes, K1, sending those out to the investors. That's the fun stuff. We have Mr. Taylor, Brian Taylor, that is. He's on our mortgage. He's a mortgage broker. He's on our team as well. So he helps us as far as getting the best debt and the best rate, points, if there are any points to pay and all those fun stuff. And then last but not least, there's Mr. Randy Ketchum, who's also on our team on the insurance side. So he helps to make sure that we get the best insurance for what we do. So we can't, because of our the demographics that we serve, we can't necessarily get regular insurance. We have to get a specialized insurance. So he not only helps us on the property insurance, but also helps our clients on their business liability insurance, making sure they have at the minimum at least $2 million aggregate, $1 million per occurrence, just for their business. So am I forgetting anyone? No. So yeah.
And that's interesting too, because I think when we talk about this, when you're providing probably an ancillary service for your partners that are leasing for you, you're watching other groups like them operate their business, and you're probably finding ways that they can get better. Is this happening? You find that happening a little bit where it feels sort of ancillary, and then you're there helping your partners, which helps everyone, right?
The way I see it, like, I heard this phrase, and I'll leave the demographic that they were talking about out, but they say when one person grows, the whole team grows, right? So I definitely see things that way as well. As we all started, I can't speak for all of us. Some of us, we kind of met along the way, but a good portion of us pretty much started in the same position, whereby we had a certain experience level, we had a certain expertise. And then we all just meshed together. And as we continue to grow, we're all growing at the same time. One person I did leave out was Manny. He's on our general contracting team. So every single property that would need work, he's the guy that helps coordinate everything that needs to get done. He's our project manager. So yeah, we
didn't forget about you, Manny. Manny, blame the lawyers. Took us off track. All right, so now I'm curious. At some point, it sounds like the real estate bug hit you, where you realize this is a space that I want to be in. When did you come to that realization? Because you were doing some of those second chance opportunities before some of this work kind of came to you. At some point, it sounds like the real estate bug may have hit you. Walk us through, like, when did this happen? And when did you say, okay, I need to be doing more on the real estate side?
No, that's a beautiful question. That actually takes me back to when I was in college. So about 7 years ago, I went to the University of Arizona down in Tucson, Bear Down. I was actually supposed to go to school for law. So I was an economics and business administration major. And the whole point was that economics majors tend to do better on the bar exam than pre-law majors. So I was like, all right, let's do that. Like, whatever gets to the goal, sure. Right? Yeah. So I was an econ major, and probably I graduated in 3 years. So probably about that like junior, senior year, that last year, I had the privilege of being able to do a week of pre-law, meaning like I would go to the law school, actually experience what it's like. And, one thing I quickly realized was everything that I liked about school was just sucked out like a vacuum, and everything that I hated about school, the social life, actually like, meeting new people was just like, wait, no, I mixed that up. Sorry. Everything I liked about school got sucked out, but everything I hated about school, just reading books, just sitting down, listening to a monotone instructor, like just got magnified. And it was, yeah, I had a couple sleepless nights, and I realized that this isn't what I wanted to do.
Mm-hmm.
And I told my mom that, but I didn't have a plan. And when you're dealing with Nigerian parents, you better have a plan, because if you're not going to be one of the three cardinal professions, doctor, lawyer, engineer, it was as though, at least at that time, it was as though I felt as though I was like a black sheep. And at that same week, I had read this book, Rich Dad Poor Dad, which I'm sure a lot of your listeners have read, and that was the nail in the coffin. That really opened my eyes to not just entrepreneurship, but real estate in general. And so there was a lot of questions, as you can imagine, that I had. And after having that week of pre-law, after reading that book, after having that conversation with my mom, what she did next was actually quite beautiful. She had connected me. Well, she blew up. She was very mad.
Jack, yeah, you knew that was coming. You're like, okay, let's get past that.
Yeah. It gave me the lecture of my life.
Mm-hmm.
But then she connected me with the pastor that I basically had grown up with, and that gentleman he sat me down and we had a conversation, and I was really vetting him. When I had that meeting with him, I was really vetting him, because whatever he was about to tell me would be based off of whether or not this man actually owned a business or anything. Because it's one thing if someone's telling you to start a business, it's a whole nother thing if they actually own a business and have done it before. Mm-hmm. And so the first question I asked the gentleman, the pastor, was, hey, pastor, have you ever owned a business before? Right? That was my vetting question. And he sat back in his chair and he's like, Prince, I actually own 8 businesses. Oh. And that was like, whoa, right? Like, I didn't expect
now
him
I'm
to.
listening. Now I'm listening.
Right.
Go.
And so he goes down the list of all 8 of his businesses. He owned nonprofits, things like that. But then business number 8 was he owned real estate here in America as well as back home in Nigeria.
Interesting.
And so that was really where the light bulb went off, because we were supposed to have a quick 30-minute pep talk. He was supposed to cheer, give me a pep talk, give me a lecture, put me back on my way to law school, and I'd become a lawyer. But we ended up having a 4-hour conversation just about real estate and business. And it was, that was really the catalyst that set me down this path, because he really, one, he took the time to really understand where I was, but then 2, he kind of shared like how the mechanics of it all worked. So then January 1st, 2016, I basically made a vow to myself, and I promised, like, wherever I am, this is the industry that I want to be in. So the conversation was like 2 days before Christmas 2015. And then, yeah.
What a confluence of situations where you got that exposure to the real life of, here's what lawyers going to look like for the next, say, 40 years. At the same time, Rich Dad Poor Dad's dropped on your head. And then immediately after that, you met with, in essence, someone who could be a catalyst of that philosophy in action. Like, this stuff happens for a reason, comments. Like, maybe there might be something there of what's going on here. Hey, but don't worry. My mom still doesn't understand what I do at all. So, hey, it's okay. Why don't
It's funny.
No idea.
Most people, when I tell them what I do, they don't understand it either. Like, it's mainly like an industry thing. If I tell them I run a private equity company, they're kind of like, okay, that's cool.
It's a little bit easier for me now, but when I was doing the hedge fund thing, I just asked people if they understood what a bond was. And if the answer was yes, then I would explain what I did. If it was no, I told them that I worked to drive through a Burger King. I was like, it's just not worth it, man. I'm not going to, I'm not even going to explain it to you because we don't got 30 minutes on a whiteboard. So I'm just going to let it go.
Dang,
We'll
don't
move
do that
on.
to
We'll
him,
move
man.
on. Next question. We'll move on. Now it's a bit easier, but there still is like, and for folks, our folks listening are usually, into their careers, professionals, investors, etc. But they have kids, and I want their kids to be listening to this to say, hey, there isn't a predefined box, and I still feel like that stigma still exists of go to college, get a job. It's still there, even though that you're fighting against it. I'm fighting against it in my own home, right? I'm trying to get through to some of these kids, but that stigma is still there. That taking a run at some of these more non-traditional items is still has some sort of it's still confusing for folks and kind of scary. So I mean,
Yeah.
you're probably doing your best to knock that wall down, and so am I.
You know what? Back in that 2016, so I was 20 years old. I'm 27 today. And back in 2016, when I decided to go down this path, a lot of it was not common. It wasn't common even in the slightest. A lot of my friends went on to become medical professionals. Some are still in med school. Some also became attorneys. Some went into engineering. And I gotta say, like, apologies. We live next to Luke Air Force Base, so there's that going on.
quick flyover.
I know, right? So my dad disowned me. He disowned me for like 2 years because I didn't go down that path. Like when cultural families, and it's not just Nigerians, but I know Indians deal with it, Asians deal with it.
Yep.
It was a very big blow for him to accept that I didn't want to go to law school. My mom took, outside of her initial reaction, she took it quite well. She supported me once she realized that, okay, Prince, he has a plan. I think that was a big thing, actually. I had a vision and I had a plan. And I just stuck with it. Hell came, high waters came, but I still stuck with the plan. And so I think that's a very big key, especially for the younger generation. Like really, I was reading books. I wasn't just bumming it. I wasn't just sitting around doing nothing and saying I wanted to be a real estate investor. I was actually taking the time. I was investing in myself. I was reading the books. I was going to the seminars. I was going to the events. I was spending that money to really level up my game and become a better version of myself, day in, day out, including Sundays. So that was one thing that really mattered the most was that. Even several years later, my dad called me one day randomly. This was after he had disowned me, and he was like, "You know what, Prince? What have you been up to anyway?" Like he just randomly asked me that, just like that too. Like, what have you been up to anyway? He has an accent, so not exactly like that. And I kind of I sat down with him. It was like a 1 hour conversation, but I explained everything to him from A to Z. And at the end of the conversation, he just he just said, long pause. And he's just like, "You know what? I'm proud of you, son." And waterfall, tears, because what he saw, to my understanding, what he saw was, okay, his son is actually doing something. He's actually making something of himself. He's not what I had previously had thought. So it really meant a lot that he said that, and he still supports me to this day.
Man, that's an awesome story. And I think for some of the younger folks listening, and you have those younger folks in your life, I think what's tricky here is this is a lot of work, and you described it. It's a lot of work to forge your own path. And I keep banging on the drum. It's like, well, if you're going to be good at anything, it's a lot of work. So pick which work you would like, because it's work, and that's okay. As long as you're aiming it towards a goal that makes sense for you. I mean, it's all good. But I think folks don't know that playbook, so you got to go find it, right? And I'm jealous. I'm jealous of, play generational gaps here. I'm jealous of your generation and the tools that you have and the knowledge that you have available to you. I'm super jealous, because it was me reading books, and every book I could get my hands on, and the people I could talk to. People are so much more accessible today. You can ask me anything about the journey, and probably for you too, you're going to answer it in grave detail and help people walk that journey. everyone's available for you, and they're accessible. What an amazing thing. And so it's probably a thing that you've been leaning on as well, is just the accessibility of especially people in the real estate space. Talk about that a little bit. I mean, there's probably mentors there that are kind of helping and guiding you through this as well, and how helpful people have been in this real estate side.
You know what? So that's a double-edged sword. And here's why. Okay, cool. It's a double-edged sword. And here's why. Because, I mean, I'm still a young guy, right? I'm still a young guy, but I was really young back then. And the thing that you don't know what you don't know until you know it, until you find out. And when you're young and you go to some of these meetings or you start reaching out to these people, everyone and their mom wants to give you advice. Everyone and their mom wants to give you their advice. And the thing is, when I was younger, the biggest challenge was figuring out who to receive advice from. Like, I bumped my head a lot. You know, I had dealt with all kinds of tragic. I'll give you an example. You know, I've dealt with embezzlement. You know, partnering with the wrong people. You know, people giving you the wrong advice, you taking it, and you end up at the bottom because of that. You know, I've dealt with partners or people saying that they're going to do one thing and they're not, and they don't do it. You know, it's a tough and it's a lonely road, but also sticking to it. And again, going back to having that vision and the plan, you know, keeping God in your life. That's really the thing that helped out the most, because they're also on the other side of the sword. There were key people that were very pivotal to this process, to this journey. Things didn't really change in my business until I hired a mentor. Shout out to John Burley. You know, like things did not change until I actually hired a mentor. Like, I sought out this person and said, you know what, this guy is exactly where I would want to be. I like the way that he runs his family. He has this great quality of life, nice work-life balance, all that jazz. And, you know, here's the business that he runs. Let me emulate that. Let me copy that. Let me, you know, work with this particular person and structure my business to be as similar as like this. Like, that was actually the very key piece, is finding a mentor early on. You know, because again, going back when you're younger and you haven't established that experience or that wisdom, you know, there's a lot of people that want to mentor you or want to give you advice. But, you know, I think one of the key things I learned during that process is, if someone wants to mentor you for free, you know, you're going to pay. You're going to pay one way. So you might as well pay to play and pay up front. You know, that's the big thing. Like, and the higher it is, what I found also, like, the higher the barrier to entry, generally the better the experience of a mentor that is.
Oh, it's fascinating. So, I mean, there's a couple of key takeaways there, and folks that are searching for the mentor is, that barrier to entry means something, because they're trying to self-select too, and trying to take people out that aren't serious. But I think the thing in there that you said was really interesting is, it's hard to know who to take advice from, because you don't know who you don't know. What you don't know, as you said, find people that you want to emulate, right? Find people that have all those boxes checked, not just the financial side, which is interesting that you're looking at, how's that family looking? How is their life looking, right? Beyond the business. That's a key point to talk about. Find those people that are in that position and seek them out. That's really good. This is awesome. I think we could go another hour or so. I think what we'll do is this. Let's come back. I want to check in with you in like 6-8 months, and I want to see where you are. We'll have you back on the episode, and then kind of give us an update. Yeah, part 2. Give us an update of kind of where you are. I think that would be awesome. In the meantime, Prince, where can people find you? Where can they learn more about what you're up to?
That's a great question. You can follow me on LinkedIn, same Prince Eboka. You can go to our website, pillarhousingllc.com. That's Pillar, P as in Paul, I Isaac, not killer, like, you know. Yeah. You can also, I know, right. Cut that out.
Pillar good, killer bad.
Yeah, exactly. You can also send me an email At Prince at pillarhousingllc.com. That's probably the most direct way. My phone number, it's like
They'll find you. If they can't find you on LinkedIn or send you an email, we'll create a barrier to entry. If you can't find him, if you can't find this Prince online or on LinkedIn and you can't find Pillar Housing, I don't know. Maybe we don't want them as investors. Maybe we don't want them on board. We'll use that as the barrier. We'll use that. Prince, this has been awesome. Thank you so much.
Hey, thank you for having me again. And I look forward to part 2.
Part 2 coming. We'll bring part 2 on too. Thank you so much. And thank you for our listeners. We'll see you next time.